All right. We are ready to start tonight. So we have a few online and a nice room full. Welcome back, everyone, after a couple of months of no meetings and picnic. It feels like forever. We're feeling really rusty. But yay for leftover picnic food to switch it up from pizza. Kind of sick of pizza anyway. So thanks, Amber, for heating that up and making that happen tonight. Yeah. So just a couple of things coming up. I wanted to announce next month, we were planning to talk about some school supports and different resources available in the school system. We're going to switch it up. There's been lots of comments on the foster care page, and we love to address hot topics. So we're going to switch it up and talk about that new safety framework and reunification plans, because a lot of foster parents expressing just some frustrations with maybe where things are at. So hoping to just bring some perspective to how things are working now with that new safety framework. So next month, we're going to have Peggy and Kristen from Burleigh County come and talk about that. So I don't know if you guys have been through a team meeting with the new safety framework. I just did my first one. And I actually really liked it. I felt like I got the most information out of a team meeting, like most useful information on where we were at. And I'm kind of excited because it feels like it brings consistency to the team meeting, because my team meeting experience has been like all over the board for what information is shared and kind of what you all go through. So I saw some value right out of the gate on that, but I don't understand a lot about it yet. So we've got a couple of things on the table tonight. I'm going to have Amber introduce our speakers, but they're take homes for you, a pen and a car coaster thing that she just demonstrated, the absorbent power. Put it in the bottom of your cup holder, and anything that spills, it's going to suck it up. So she said you can have more than one. One other thing I wanted to announce too, we're looking at some updates to the bylaws to make a few changes. So we're working on drafting those up, and we will be bringing those forward in the next meeting for review so that we can do a vote on them in November. A couple of things that were just a little outdated on or are locking us in a couple of ways that we want a little bit more flexibility around our meetings. So coming soon. Amber, you want to introduce our speakers?
So I'm not going to give you too much information about them because that's why I asked them to be here. But Krisann, actually, we have talked now, and I think we're BFFs actually. She is, do I call you the director, the owner of Little Lights Therapy. And then she's brought two people with her, Erin and Jill. Erin's OT, you're both speech? Oh, I got them mixed up. Sorry. Jill is OT and Erin is speech. Some of you guys may have worked with them already, and maybe some of you will be working with them in the future, but they are going to actually tell their story a little bit and how they got started, and then how to take care of our little kiddos and what we can do in order to help them out. So if you guys will have a seat up here. And yes, they did bring lots of good little treasures, so make sure you grab some. Yes, it's very open roundtable forum, so go ahead and ask some questions. They did have some handouts, so that if they don't follow that, specifically frame by frame, it's more for our information afterwards. Sorry, I'm in the way. I'm still trying to get on the camera here. So they're more for our information afterwards. There is some pens, so go ahead and grab some pens so you guys can take some notes and numbers and doodle if you need to. Okay. So with the online people, just make sure.
Okay. We got this. Thank you guys very much for having us tonight. I really appreciate it. Like Amber said, I'm Krisann Miller. I'm the owner, but I'm still a practicing therapist. I'm going on 13 years of practice now, so this is kind of my baby. And then I have Erin and Jill, who decided to come and speak, who I asked to come speak with me on some of the different things that we have going on at the clinic. So we have had the privilege of working with some of you, and hopefully look forward to in the future working with some of you else. So just a little bit about us. I started this in 2018 because I had seen a need for, I was commuting to Minot for 4.5 years, and I was done and over that. And at that point in time, there was some Medicaid changes with facilities not going into Medicaid patients' homes and kind of their scheduling things. And And so I just decided I was about ready and done to be done with big system, and I wanted to do in-home. In-home was kind of my passion. And so that's how I got started with the practice back then. And so we went from myself, I started as a sole therapist, to now we have 9 therapists total in the clinic. And that includes OT and speech. That also includes a location down in Strasburg, Linton area now as well. So that was kind of an unexpected thing. When I first hired my first employee, she was my intern, and then my next one came and they were both from Linton. So people started asking if that was my requirement, that people were from Linton when I started working. So we've grown now into 9 therapists to serve the Bismarck, Mandan, and surrounding areas, as well as the Linton, Strasburg. They were going down to Ashley. We also have a couple kids because they're so close down in the South Dakota area. So we've stretched way different directions than I thought. So that's kind of where we started. I have my master's degree from the University of Mary, as well as my autism certificate from UND. I have SOS feeding training and some extra training in emotional, behavioral, social skills, that kind of thing, extra trauma training. So kind of led me to where we are today. So I'll let these 2 girls introduce themselves and give their story.
I'm Jill Dworshak. I have been an OT for 18 years, almost 18 years, graduating with my master's from the University of Mary in 2003. My role, I guess, as a therapist at Little Lights would be more of the psych aspect of things. I have been in psych my entire career, all of which have been inpatient hospitalizations, so more of the crisis acute care type thing. I've worked in North Dakota and in South Dakota. I've worked with adults, adolescents, teens, children as young as 5 in the psych realm of things. So that is my passion. I love mental health. And Krisann, we have a lot of essentially mental health kids where we work, along with other things too, but mental health is a big underlying issue with trauma and abuse and stuff like that. So yeah, that's me.
Well, they just leave it up to me at the end, because we totally fought over the microphone. So my name is Erin Graves, and I'm a speech language pathologist. I have recently graduated in April from the University of Mary with my master's degree. I hold both a Bachelor of Science and a master's degree in speech language pathology. In addition to that, even that I'm a first year, I have extensive training in voice therapy, swallowing therapy, along with what's called alternative and augmentative communication. So those are like our communication devices, whether that be for children who are nonverbal or limited verbal, or even kids who choose not to be verbal, which sometimes we see that with trauma as well. So I kind of dabble in a little bit of everything as a speech therapist. My passion really lies in those kids who don't have a voice or who feel like they don't have a voice, whether that be that they physically don't talk or that they feel like they can't share. So I kind of do a little bit of everything. So working as a speech therapist with these occupational therapists has been really, really awesome. So that's just a little bit about me.
So this makes up part of our group, of our large group and our spread out group. So I just kind of want to talk a little bit about pediatric therapy in general. I'm sure you all have had some dabblings in the pediatric therapy realm, because these kids require quite extensive services. And so I think I've made it my mission in life to educate people on what OT can do. When I switched my degree from PT to OT, the physical therapist looked at me and goes, "Oh, you're going to the other therapy." Nobody knows what we do. So I'm like, well, it's just my mission in life to make people understand what we can do. So pediatric therapy in general, we can work with any age. We typically work birth to 21. However, we have started stepping into a few of the early 20 kids. So that's been kind of a new extension for us as well. But typically we can service kids from 0 to 21. And it's kind of strange sometimes that we can work with babies, but we work with babies now with torticollis type issues, muscle issues, a lot of addiction type issues with neurological type things. So we can step into that realm as well. So OT and speech can work from birth to the end of life. So really there's a whole lot we can do for a whole lot of different people. We can work with any disability in general. So, and like these guys said, if you guys have any questions, please, we're very flexible people. Interrupt us. You probably have to. So we service any child with any disability or any developmental concerns in general, whether that be we know we have something going on or we don't know if there's something going on, but we might have questions that there's something going on. We serve your typical autisms, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, but we also serve into the mental health realm of ODD, reactive attachment disorder, trauma, addiction, mood disorders. And again, Jill has extensive training and knowledge base and her work history in that trauma. So naturally she fit very, very well in our realm. One cool thing about outpatient services, and this is, I know it gets very difficult between school services and outpatient services, our kids do not need diagnoses. There does not need to be a diagnosis for a kid to qualify for outpatient services. You know, in the school you have to have a diagnosis, and with us you don't. If a kid can't tie their shoes, if a kid is saying their R's incorrectly, we can qualify kids on a way larger scale than some of our school service counterparts. So for some of those kids that may not qualify for school services, but yet are kind of lagging behind, or there's maybe something else going on, we can help fill that gap. And that's a really nice feature that we have and a nice option that we have. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about OT, and I'll let Jill pop in wherever she wants to pop in. What exactly is OT? Have you guys dealt with OTs? I'm guessing a lot of people think OT is handwriting, sensory processing, that kind of thing, but there's so much more where we can do social skills, emotional skills. Occupational therapy, essentially the definition is that it's anything that helps an individual reach all of their full function in their daily lives. And I don't know the formal definition of for speech, but I imagine it's along the same thing. So that can go from anything. And so I have some of the areas that we address. We address play skills, self-care skills. That can be dressing, brushing teeth, taking baths or showers. And so any of those things that are affecting daily lives, like I said, tying shoes, learning to cut their food, any of those kind of things that are those daily issues. We do toileting, you know, we can help with potty training type things, a lot of that sensory type thing, sensory processing. There's 2 of us in the office now that are feeding trained. 2 of us took it's called the SOS feeding, and it's sequential oral sensory. It's a intensive 4-day training, which doesn't seem intensive, but it really was intensive. So we're both trained in that for feeding therapy. So we do offer feeding therapy as well, which is also an unknown sometimes about OT, is that they can do feeding issues for some of those picky eaters or some of those kids that gag or throw up or some of those sensitivities. And it's nice to have Erin here, who also has extensive training in the swallowing aspect. So really together we can make a really nice connection with any of those physical issues that they have as far as swallowing, oral motor skills. I also trained in the Beckman for some of the oral motor skills. So with that, it makes it very good for some of those feeding kids. Sensory processing, we do fine motor skills. A lot of our kids come in with low tone or are just weak or kind of draggy or mopey. We can do strengthening for those types of things. And one thing that is now up and coming big in our world is the executive functioning. Executive functioning skills or cognition skills, also an OT versus not a versus, but we can work collaboratively in those skills. That's your organization, your memory, your impulse control, the kids that can't wait, the kids that can't plan anything. We can tackle some of those skills as well. And they're now finding research is starting to show more that those are kind of the basis of the cause of ADHD, that these kids are lacking in these executive functioning skills. So that impulse control and that memory and those kind of things. So we have Who was your therapy? Sure. That gets very tricky, you know, especially what we find in with kids is you can have multiple disciplines working on multiple things, which gets also very tricky. Like, how do you decide? Where do you go? So that's where we really, you know, we're looking for PT. So if anybody knows a good physical therapist, please send them my way, because that's to add to the team. This is where you hope that you get a good team. They'll be like, maybe it's not so much of a gross motor problem, but maybe it's more of a mouth problem, a neck problem, a core problem. You know, they used to say that OT and PT OT was above the waist, PT was below the waist. That's not very accurate either. We look at that as a whole as a whole person. We look at that as a thing. And so, you know, there's kids we get in that, yep, we're low tone all over, but we really look at our walking and our gait, our stepping, our stairs. We look at that as a physical therapist thing. But if we can handle some of those, like that upper low tone, that's something that probably an OT can address. And then we collaborate with our speech too to figure out who the best fit for that child is, because it may vary from kid to kid.
And kind of addressing, so the question was, speech works on feeding and so does OT. How does that work? And sometimes that really relies on your therapist and being like, where's my comfortability in this? Me, myself, and I, being a first year, I don't have the extensive training in feeding that Krisann as an OT can offer. So do I necessarily pick up that kid? It's a possibility. So what I do as a speech therapist is I look at the child as a whole, kind of what Krisann was saying. And so how can I collaborate as a speech therapist with our occupational therapist? So whereas I have a lot of this swallowing component understanding. So when we look at swallowing, we look at swallowing as from here to here. I look at this. And some of that feeding that Krisann's doing is looks at those teeth and our muscle movements. And I really focus on down here. So that's where my strength lies. So I can totally see an OT. PT is interesting, but an OT really working on that gag reflex if they have that training. That is something I look forward to doing in my upcoming years as a therapist. But it's really nice when we have a whole team approach that we can best serve these kids in just so many more ways.
And I think when we start digging into these kids and we start to realize, hey, maybe we think we can take this on as an OT, or we can take this on as a speech therapist. Maybe we get into it and realize we can't, that there's, hey, we're finding something else. Then it's best practice for us to refer out to somebody else. It's tough because you get a lot of those therapies, it looks the same. And this is where we hope as therapists, we do a better job at saying, hey, we're working on this because of this. Hey, I'm working on core posture because I want you to be able to sit up and eat. You know, where a PT might look at it and say, I want to work on your core posture because I want you to walk upstairs without falling down, or things like that. So it looks similar. We as professionals try to make sure that we differentiate ourselves between disciplines as well. But it's really nice when you have a whole collaborative team that's willing to work together because I've gotten into some of these feeding kids. I'm like, this kid sticks his tongue out all the time, or I don't think this kid can swallow. And then I'll call Erin and be like, Erin, look in their mouth. So she'll really look in their mouth and be like, hey, there's a tonsil problem. There's an adenoids problem. Maybe we have a hearing problem. You know, so it's really nice to have that amongst disciplines. So that's really nice. Did that answer your question? Okay. Just let me know if I don't. So that's a big thing too. And a lot of OTs, we have stepped into this realm, especially with a lot of the kids that you guys work with, is the but did you know slide. We can work on some of those emotional regulation skills, those social skills. We can work with kids out in the community. We'll take kids on shopping outings. We'll take kids to the mall just to teach them how to function in public. You know, we have kids that can't go to the grocery store with mom or dad, or we can't sit in a restaurant to have dinner. We'll work on some of those things to get kids integrated into the community as well, to make them more functional adults. Transitional skills, especially those, and this is Jill's specialty and expertise too, is those transitional ages. You know, when kids get up to that 16, 17, 18, now what do we do with you? Now where do you go? I don't remember, we had Power of 100 one night, and the lady gave the quote of how many kids that came out of the foster care system went into homeless shelter. It was the youth works lady, I can't remember her name, but how many of the foster care kids came out and went into homeless shelters, and it was astounding. And so we really hope to rev up our adolescent teenager thing to talk about what we can do for them, because we really can do a lot for them. And then just to be there as a family support, give education, be advocates for kids and families. We really are. I have a wonderful staff that I feel like always has the best interest of kids and families. And we want families to feel supported, because if families don't feel supported, then kids don't feel supported. And then it's just a whole mess. So, and what we tell our interns when our interns come through, you don't just get this kid, you get the family, and you take that family and you treat that family with respect, no matter what their situation. So we really focus on that, and as a role as therapists in general, but as OT, you know, the caring profession, and we really want that as a holistic approach.
So for the transitionals, even like the kids who are going to be in high school, the social skills are completely different from elementary school and from middle school. So a lot of what I will do is I will do the social in participation, what's appropriate and essentially what's not appropriate. I work with a lot of kids who have anger problems, depression, self-esteem issues, anxiety is a big one if they're feeling suicidal. Let's see. And then you have like the kids with oppositional defiant disorder, ADHD, underlying mental health issues who have been actually diagnosed with like depression and stuff like that. So for the transitional aspect of things, we will work on, like Krisann said, how are you going to be an active member of society? How are you going to be an appropriate member of society? Because we want our kids to succeed. We don't want to see them in the paper or on social media, as far as I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So we will work a lot on like work skills. Okay, what do you need in order to have a job? That goes into time management skills. Okay, so what are you gonna need you need to like set an alarm. You need to do all like, you know, get ready for your day, make sure that you're gonna be on to work on time. And that goes too with high school, making the bus and all that kind of stuff too. But yeah, so we want our kids to be productive members of society. We want them to succeed. We want to hear good things about them, and you know, so no. Exactly. And I've actually been working with some kids lately who have that problem. And this person was going to be in middle school, so they have to go from class to class to class. And they were worried, and the family was worried, are they going to get there on time? Are they going to wander and see something outside? Oh, that looks great, and then be late for class. They were very worried about that. So far, so good, but I suppose as the year goes on, it might be more of a struggle, but and also the aspect of it is that they're teenagers, they're rebellious, they don't want to get up and go to school. I didn't want to get up and go to school, you know, but I did. And so there's that fine line there. Okay, are you just being defiant, or do you really not have those time management capabilities? So
we have assessments to assess those executive functioning deficits, and we look at regulation of emotions, self-initiation of time management. So a lot of those, organization, impulse control, working memory, for a lot of these kids, especially these kids that have histories of addiction, you know, we look at, they have the worst memory known to humankind. You know, where we expect a lot of these kids, yes, you can do that. You're 13 years old, you can go and you can remember, if I give you 3-step directions, you can do that. But when we look at some of our kids, they legitimately cannot. They'll catch typically they catch either the first step or the very last step. they don't catch them all. And it's maddening because you're like, come on, man, like get it together. So we do have assessments we use. And so we work, and as the kids get older, so we work on these skills, and we've started to work on these skills a lot younger. When we get kids a lot younger, we can start to build those skills a lot longer. Because we want them to even learn those young, because we don't, typically what would happen, and this is what we struggle with in the outpatient world, and this is where I think we try and advocate more, is a lot of times you go to a pediatrician or doctor, hey, something's wrong, wait and see. Wait and see. They'll grow out of it. Wait and see. I believe in parent gut. I believe in your guys' guts. When there's something wrong, there's something wrong. And a lot of the time we get the wait and see approach, and then it's just people get lost. Now what do we do? Who can help me when I get told to wait and see, but I know that there's something wrong? So we really try and preach, hey, the earlier we can get these kids in, the more intervention we can get them, the younger we can get them, the more chance we have to get them on the right path. And a lot of the kids, especially the kids you guys work with, have not started out life on very great feet. Like they've been handed a really rough stack of cards. So if we can build those skills, and what we really want our kids to do is we want to put it on them. We want to teach them the skills. We want to teach them to be self-reliant. We don't want to have our kids grow up and have to be dependent on everybody else to do their thing. We want them to learn the skills. And so that's where we try and get those kids younger and teach those skills, and really give a good idea of what skills they have and what deficits they actually have, because we're finding a lot more of these kids have no memory, have no impulse control, have no safety awareness, or just don't care. I know one question we get asked a lot is the difference between what OT and counseling does. And so I kind of wanted to touch on that. Counseling, we need our counselors. Desperately, we need our counselors. We are not mental health counseling professionals. Sometimes we become that because kids just spill whatever they feel like spilling. But we really need them to handle the trauma piece. We really need them to handle that kid's past, that kid's trauma from family, friends, whatever they've been through. What our role is in this is to address the deficits that come because of that trauma. So we want to teach them, if you had a kid that, a lot of time we're seeing a lot more sensory problems now because of kids that are born addicted or have been addicted or were exposed or whatever. And we're seeing a lot of just difficulty with regulation. We can't sit still, we can't focus, we can't transition. We're very rigid in our activities. And so we try and teach them the skills and whatever works for them in whatever environment they're in. It's one thing we really like to do is go to them and go where they are, because it looks very different in a clinic. You bring a kid into a clinic, it looks very different. I have a girl, I like this story a lot. She was 18 years old when I got her. She was Down syndrome, and she was being seen at another facility, and she was not doing very well. Like the things it was tough. We brought her home. We taught her to shower at home. We taught her to cook at home. We taught her to do her hair at home, dress at home. And it was a whole different scenario. And it was really, I really like her story a lot, because it showed even a little bit later on in life how generalizing into that home environment too makes a difference for these kids. She was drawing squares and circles. I told Amber this story. And this is actually, she is the reason Erin and I met. Erin did respite care for this child of mine. So she was not showering by herself. She was not picking out her own clothes. She was not cooking at all. She was not getting ready for any of those transitional life skills. She was drawing squares. And at that point in time, we need to turn from those basic skills, like we would teach pre-K, preschool, those type of skills and motor skills. We look towards that functional transition into adulthood. So that's, again, what I love about OT, that I saw a meme once that said, welcome to OT, where we can justify anything. and honestly, I think it's true. Really, it's true. So we can make things therapeutic. If we have a family that says we have a problem, you let me have it and we'll try our best. And again, this is where we depend on our other people too. If I can't do it, I'm going to find somebody that can, because I can't do it all. I don't know it all. So
I think each of us, how many did we have? 9, you said? Okay. Each of us has a different specialty, essentially. Like there's a couple of OTs who love the babies, who do the reflexes and the whatever happens to babies. Okay. Then there's me who does not work with babies. And I will do the mental health part of things, and like how the transitional part, I will do like fine motor skills, because that all comes in to play also, because a lot of times anger, kids will get mad. Let's say they don't win a game, or they can't tie their shoes right away, and they get angry, so I will come in, or I guess we all do this also, but okay, how can we handle our anger? Anger is a secondary emotion where there's something else underlining it. Are you scared, or is there something that you're fearing? Are you sad? Are you lonely? And anger is a little bit of something that they can control. Whereas if they're feeling sad, they can't control that, essentially. So yeah, I like working at Little Lights because everyone has their own thing. I obviously do not do feeding, and I do not do babies, but that's okay, because there's someone else there who does. So it's very helpful, actually.
any more questions about OT at this moment in time? We could ramble, but we'll let it go to Erin. She's going to talk a little bit about speech and all that speech can do for kids.
You guys, I love my OT friends. So as a speech therapist, I had a kid today who really made me think, and I'm going to say it more appropriately than he did, because that's just some of my kids. He goes, don't you just work on speech and sounds? And I said, no, I do so much more than that. And I'll tell you what, he did not ask me that nicely, but that's okay. So whatever questions you have, I'm sure will not be as bad as what I was asked today, and that is okay. So what speech therapy is it's a lot. And so kind of where I gave you that visual before is where I work from our lower throat all the way on up to the head and the brain. So what speech is not only do I work on speech and our articulation, that's like our speech sounds. Fun fact about me, I didn't think I could ever do speech because I was in speech for a very, very long time. So we work on speech sounds such as our S's, and when we have our kids who make lisps, so valley, fat on a, so I really hate doing that because that's what I did. So we work on articulation. We also work on language, and this is one of my favorite things to do. So language means a lot more than what we just think, right? So language, what I look at is what kids understand, right? So what do we comprehend? That following directions component, listening to stories, following along. And then I look at that expression component. What kids say to us? How do they express themselves? What are things that how do they label certain things? How do they retell a story? I look at all certain components like that with language. Another thing that speech does is we have some oral motor skills along with that feeding. And again, that's that mouth movement, right? So that's how our kids move our mouths, how we move our tongue, how we move our jaw. There's a lot of things that go into feeding I could tell you about all day long, but those are also some things speech works on. My favorite component that I work on is the swallowing. I have a 16-week internship that I held over at Sanford inpatient and at outpatient therapies. Swallowing, we look at swallowing where we see when kids take a drink or something, and then we go, and we cough every time we take a drink, or every time we eat macaroni and cheese, we hear that. We cough, or we get food that comes out, or we get kids that put food in the inner parts of our mouths. We work on swallowing also. That's one of my favorite things that I do. Another thing we work on is fluency and stuttering, and I'm really excited to share that with you guys, especially when we look at foster kids. I've had, just for example, I've had only 2 stuttering cases so far in my very short career, and both of my stuttering cases were trauma-based. So when we look at stuttering and we look at that fluency component, so when we stop and we stutter in our speech, trauma really has a role in that diagnosis as well. And so that's a really interesting one for me to help kids on, and where I kind of step in that mental health component. We help dive into kids, let's talk about our bumpy speech and how does that make you feel? And we really dive into that. And that's why I like working with my OT friends along with our counseling, because we find when we hear that bumpy speech that there's a lot more than just stuttering that happens. So those are other things that speech can work on. Then we have that executive functioning skills. So OT and speech, we have a lot of fun. So there was a question over here earlier about, well, are you going to be able to make my kid listen when they, want to turn, listen to the alarm? I hear you, because I hear you. So the fun thing is I find that kids, foster parents or grandparents will be like, hey, do X, Y, and Z. And then in speech, I realize, hey, I don't know if we understand what X, Y, and Z are. We may just understand what Z is. And so we start diving into those different components and starting that receptive piece, what our kids understand with those directions. And we really start diving in, what are the consequences? What's going to happen because of what we've done? And then how can we work on making that better? So we really do a lot of that cognition and that executive functioning. I have a lot of experience with kids who have been in accidents, car accidents, traumatic births. I've even had kids who've had physical abuse. So speech really kind of hits onto a lot of those areas as well. Oh my gosh, and my last favorite one, well, I have two favorite ones, is my hearing rehab. Any of our kids who have hearing loss, whether that be they have a hearing aid, a cochlear implant, speech also works in that as well. Cochlear implants and hearing aids are actually not the end all be all. You have to do a little bit of work to get there. And then my voice therapy. I love my voice therapy. So we have kids who are really, really quiet and you can't hear them, or they sound like this, or they just sound super different. You're like, man, there is something not right with that. Or we speak with a glottal fry. I'm telling you, like, there are kids out there who sound different. I have no problem. Like, listen, they're all laughing at me, but I do this all day, every day. So I make kids feel comfortable and be like, hey, like, I hear you. Like, you feel like your speech is normal. Let's talk about it and let's make it feel safe, because sometimes speaking like that is not safe for our kids. We'll find down the line that they caused a lot of trauma because they were speaking in a certain way. And then the final and last thing, I'm sorry, I know I talk a lot, but is that AAC component. I would say a good majority of my kids on my caseload currently do not speak, or speak very little, or choose not to speak. And when I say choose not to speak, some of you may be familiar with the term selective mutism. And so that's when we have that trauma component where kids, there's something psychological where speaking is just not an option for them. And so those are things that speech can also work on, and working on getting alternative ways to communicate, whether that be through sign language. I am very well educated in sign language, whether that be through mouthing or lip reading, or whether that be through communication devices, electronically ones, or even paper ones. So we have a lot of different options in speech, but the biggest thing, as I say, is kids deserve to have a voice. Each voice is different, but you still deserve to have one. And so that's where speech really fits into our kids' lives. So if there's ever a concern you guys have with your kids' speech, language, their understanding, their voice, their hearing, that's what we're here to serve you guys with. A lot of our parents go, I don't even know if I have a speech or language problem. And we talk about it and we work through it, and I help you find those answers you're looking for. So that's a little bit about what speech does. Yeah. Speech teaches kids to talk back, is what I say. I teach the kids to talk back. I say, I'm really sorry, Mom, but today we're going to work on the word no. So, it's hard, but I'd rather my kids tell me no, 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 than just never tell me anything and just get angry and cry. So I'd rather you tell me no than do some other destructive things. So I'll teach your kid to talk back. Do you guys have any other questions about what speech does? And if you ever do, we are here and you know where to find us.
I have to give this story because Erin came into my world. I bugged her for 3 years. I was persistent for 3 years. So I had this kid that I was working with, and he now just entered middle school, very behaviorally challenged child. throwing desks, talking back at the teacher, like everything you could possibly do, running out of the classroom. And we worked on emotional reg for this kid for a very, 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 very long time. And I'm like, I think he doesn't get it. Like, I just think he doesn't get it. This kid could not problem solve anything to save his life. He was easily frustrated. So this is again where we look at those cognitive functions. When we can't play a game and figure it out and we get mad and we shove it away, we have a problem, right? So we don't have any frustration tolerance for anything. So when Erin jumped on, we're like, hey, I got a kid for you. Soon to be middle schooler. Well, she did her assessment on him and found out exactly how low he was in his comprehension, his expression. There was a lot of areas this kid was significantly low in the speech area. And so if we have questions that, hey, our kid's not following directions, very often our speech and language and behavioral concerns go very closely hand in hand, and speech is not the first one people go to. So we look at our kids in a realm that, hey, do we really understand what they're hearing? Do we really understand that they're able to follow our directions? Do we really understand that they need to do, that they know what they need to do? So we just call our speech friends and be like, hey, I need a comprehension exam, please. And she does a great job of like, she's very thorough in their mouths, looking at their mouths. A lot of times if our kids aren't sleeping, right? Do we have tonsil adenoids problems? Do we have nose problems? Do we have ear problems? She is very good about dealing with that kind of stuff. So we look at some of those other problems that present, and that collaborative team approach is always positive for that.
And that really leads into well with an OT. And when we look at foster care, we see our kids, sometimes our kids present with a lot of anger, right? That's what we can control. But sometimes what we forget is why is that anger there? I see very often a lot of that anger stem from we're trying to cover something up. And sometimes it's that language and that comprehension. For example, I have also had an internship experience over at Century High School, and I had a kid tell me some very foul words and he was not going to participate. And I said, okay. And we got through it. It took about a month to do it, but we did it. And it was very low. And so to cover up how difficult that test was and how difficult those questions were, we lashed out in the ways we knew we could. And so that's because he wanted to think I couldn't see it, but I knew. And that's okay. And I know, and I'll wait you out. But then to go off of the point where Krisann goes, I look in your mouths, I look everywhere. I'm anything up here, I am there. So I see tonsils and adenoids. I even take a peek in kids' ears. A future thing we look to serve is even with hearing screenings as well. Currently, we do not offer hearing screenings, but stay tuned in the future. But I'm more than willing to refer you guys for hearing screenings. But I just love those kids and I just love those kids. So I serve definitely birth to 21. I see the littlest of babies and I see the oldest of babies. I mean, they're well older than me sometimes, but we kind of see a little bit of everything in speech. So like Krisann said, if there's something, just let me know. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. So the question is there a certain age where you can't fix it anymore? And I say no. And I say no because of my personal experience. I grew up in Illinois. And if you know anything about Illinois, Illinois is a very poor state. I never was serviced in the school system. Medicaid said no, no, no. I came to college and I was pretty poor intelligible, like what you could understand. I had a lot of speech errors, 7 to be exact. I went to speech therapy for a very, very long time through a pro bono clinic at the University of Mary. And sometimes I say, if I can do it, I'm sure going to give it my A1 best shot. I don't care if you're 17 and you're coming to me with a lisp. I don't care if you're 17 and coming to me because you can't say your D's or your B's. Or even if, hey, like we don't even know pronouns, she, her, they, anything like that. So sometimes they say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but in the speech and OT world, we'll sure give it a try. Outside of here, I do a lot of volunteer work with high school students with disabilities, and I also do volunteer work with those in the transition age 21 on up to about 30. I really believe people can learn anything. You know, hey, like you in the back, have you ever grouted the bathtub before? No, but that's okay. I'm sure YouTube and a construction person can sure teach you. We'll all learn. Like it's okay, but it may take a lot of time and we may make mistakes. So no, I think it's never too late for a kid to try. Yeah, great question. So if I don't do a hearing test, so for my standpoint as a speech therapist, what I offer are hearing screenings. So hearing screenings only look at a small portion. So if I can't do a hearing screening, but we have hearing concerns, hey, I'm not sure if my child's responding, I would see you in the clinic and I would kind of run a few informal tests. For example, I just did this with one kid. I dropped a pile of books on the other side of the room and I didn't get a head turn. I clapped really close to that child's ear or snapped and we head turned. And so I'm like, you know, we should be hearing a little further away. Let me make a referral to you. Here are several hospitals and clinics in the area. Here are some doctors I've worked with in the past. What I would do is always make a referral to audiology. And so those are our hearing doctors. They look in depth with really expensive equipment, I have to be quite honest, and they are very good at their jobs. From there, they can tell me, okay, this is where our kid has a hearing loss. From here to here, we can't hear. So for example, we can't hear these certain sounds or we can't hear these certain items. And I take a look at that in speech and I say, okay, let's practice rehabbing our hearing. So we'll get those hearing aids placed in. And hearing aids, as crazy as it sounds, they don't sound like normal hearing. They sound very electronic, very computerized, very distorted. And so we kind of have to practice our brain and saying, okay, I hear that little computer sound, that's the duh, duh, duh sound. And I see your face making that noise. And now I can see, okay, now you're saying dog. And I recognize that. So we kind of do an informal assessment, but I send it always on off to a more appropriate referral. And then we rehab it and treat it from there. Yeah, that happens. Right. So the question is, what if audiology, says, hey, it's all good. You got that hearing aid put in, we're good. And your kid goes, so, that there's regular hearing. I would always make the next referral to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Is there an abnormality within our ear? Do we have earwax blocking it? Hopefully the audiologist would check that. So the question is what if something we think is wrong with their ear, but the audiologist says it's not? That happens more than we think. And so, right. And so if the audiologist doesn't say anything, we would check an ear, nose, and throat doctor. But if the ear and hearing test showed no abnormalities as a speech therapist, I would take a look and see it case by case to see if there's anything I could do. Sometimes my hands get tied if I don't know if there's a hearing loss or if there's anything abnormal with the ear. I hope that answers your question. I know sometimes we are like, there's something wrong with our kid. And if you truly feel there's something wrong, give us a call and I can say, hey, here's some other referrals. Parents are always welcome to a second opinion. Sometimes we forget that. You're not offending professionals. You're not. So we can always give you other outlooks on where else you could look. Does that help? Perfect. I wish I. Yeah. Yep. And sometimes there's things what we call as auditory processing disorder. And so that's when we know kids can hear and we know that there's nothing wrong, but there's something when it goes in to visualize and it stops. There's nothing else. As speech, we would take a look at that comprehension component, that receptive language, and we would look at it. Is this a hearing thing or is this something with our brain and how we understand things? And those are other things we could look at as well.
We just get the whole gamut, I tell you. I love it. I want a magic wand that'll figure out our problems. So this was a good lead into how do we know if kids are appropriate. We offer free screenings. As I know a lot of facilities do, we are willing to go to home. We are willing to go to daycare. We are willing to go wherever we have kids in clinic. We just moved into a new 6,200 square foot space. Yeah, cheer. We made it. We spent the summer short staffed because of maternity leaves and military leave, and we moved in the same summer. So it was fun. So we are located off of Capitol Avenue. We're on Capitol Way, 1615 Capitol Way. And I did I think I put the address in here in the back, I hope. Nope, sure did not. It's kitty corner from the old Spotty Athena. 1615 Capitol Way. We do have business cards too we can hand out so you guys can have the address. So just because we have an address doesn't mean we have to see kids there. But we did want to offer for those that we do service the Poppy's Promise. We hold their OT and speech contract. So it was just a wise decision to go in the same building with them. So that's another bonus for any of you guys that run into issues, kids with trauma, kids with autism, kids that need respite or ABA services, the behavioral therapy. We are in the same building now. And so we have easy access to our professionals down there, our behavioral analysts and our respite care staff. So that's another bonus where we could service more kids in one place, but also another good resource for those kids that we need to service. But we will do free screens. We will do consultations in person or over the phone. If anyone has concerns, we are more than open to a phone call, to an email. We don't expect parents. We don't expect grandparents. We know that there's a lot of grandparents caring for their grandkids in the foster care system now. We don't expect anybody to know. Sometimes it's that gut feeling there's something wrong, but we don't know what it is. Who do we go to? What do we do? And not get that wait and see. So we open up for these consults, we open up for these screens. We do offer a standardized screening, the ages and stages we do on kids that covers social, emotional, fine motor, gross motor, communication, that just does an overall screen, but sometimes those screens don't catch that. So we can gather more from a phone call sometimes, or just an in-person visit. So we welcome those at any point in time. And we can guide you in the direction that we need to have. So then the process going forward, if we do decide that we have a kiddo who needs services, it's very easy. We get a phone call, we get referrals. Most people think we get our referrals from the physicians. That is a big false. Actually, I can't think in my last how many years of practice of the last physician referral I've ever gotten. We've maybe had one or two, but most of our referrals come from foster parents, social workers, caseworkers, guardians. Word of mouth is huge for us. Just being available to visit. So all it is a phone call to our office, say, hey, I have some concerns. We talk about it. Are you wanting a screening? Are you wanting a full-blown eval? Which direction do we need to send you? Because there's sometimes we're like, we got a kid that was maybe sexually abused. Can OT help? Yes, but maybe we should send you to counseling first. So we try and navigate that path of the therapies, because we know the therapies are hard and there's so many, and kids and families get therapied out. So we want to make it as easy as possible for everyone involved. So really it starts with a phone call. We decide what route we want to go alongside you, alongside caseworkers, case managers, whoever we need to get involved. And then we go forward from there. We get the doctor's orders. We set up that with you. We decide where therapy with you is going to be. Some parents are like, yep, my kid is going to stink it up at home. We're not doing it in home. We'll come to you. We get that sometimes kids just aren't better in home. So we offer a clinic option. Hey, I can't leave work. I can't leave work so much. Can you go to daycare? We have had the absolute blessing of foster parents, and caseworkers helping us get into the school. So we do service kids in the schools in Bismarck, some of the schools in Bismarck, Mandan. So that's been a nice option where some of the schools have been very willing to be like, hey, we do it on our insurance. We don't do it on the school's dime, or the taxpayer's dime for that matter. But we'll go in and we'll actually see them during the school day at a time that's determined. So that's helped with less appointments. That's helped with less running around. The evenings, we know for you guys, get super full. And we struggle. It's a real struggle. Wherever you go, the wait lists are huge. This helps eliminate some of that wait list by being able to see kids during the day where normally we'd have to see them after school. So we do have options, and I like families to know that they have options. And so typically we do that from there. All we need is a phone call, and that's all that starts it. A phone call, an email, we'll take care of the rest. Typically we get the paperwork we need from the people we need it from, we send that doctor order, and we start the process. So we like to make it as easy because we know these kids aren't in just one service. So it's a lot of running. I just got an email from a foster dad, and he was saying how it was taking up 3 hours of day for therapies, where he had to go and sit for 3 hours of therapy. We do at this point in time allow kids to be dropped off and parents to leave. We have, knock on wood, someone please knock on wood. We have not at this point in time had any problem with parents coming to pick their kids up. Because I think that this has led to policies, especially at the company I used to work for, this led to a policy of you can never leave. You have to sit here. You can't leave. So as of now, we have not had an issue, and we really try our best to either have multiple kids, because we do see multiples. Multiple kids get seen by different therapists, so it can be done at the same time. We do really try and piggyback kids with therapy so they can only have to go once, so they're not making multiple trips. We do our best to accommodate schedules because we realize how painful this is. And then we go forward with treatment as it's decided by families, therapists, schedules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But really our goal, and I feel like this is the goal of the entire staff, is we want to make life easier for people who have to do this, for families that have to do this. And we get some, like I got a family and they're like, we have X amount of kids in the family. I am not packing up every one of those children and taking them to a therapy appointment. Especially in the wintertime, like, come on now. So we really, our goal is to make this as easy as possible, to give the most comprehensive possible and make it as easy for families, because it's already a rough road of therapies and figuring it out. So I am blessed with a great staff, a really great staff. I can't even complain. Like I said, it went a direction that I did not anticipate it going. I saw you cheer. Which one? Yes, she actually was my intern. She was my first hire. All right, we'll pass her number out later. So your kiddo's up here, or your kiddo's down in Strasburg? We can figure it out. We will do our best. Okay, here, this leads into another wonderful question. 14-year-old, very good candidate for telehealth. Okay, never mind then. But oh yes, okay, there we go. Also another option. Okay, do you see why I hired Jill? So Jill's specialty is really those older kids, and we know we need for those older kids. So this is well worth a discussion. Yes. I am not opposed to a discussion. Well, and this is a very, going through OT school and probably going through speech school, I'm gonna guess. This wasn't taught. Mental health was not taught as an avenue you go for like what we can do for these kids. But unfortunately, they say if kids don't do well socially, emotionally, etc., they don't do well academically. And what is it? The kids that are loved at home come to school to learn, but the kids that aren't loved at home go to school to be loved. Yeah, it just breaks my heart. And I have such a passion for these kids. And like I said, when I started the practice, it was a very tough time with Medicaid reimbursements for providers. And people were stopping going in home. People were stopping just doing funky things with kids with Medicaid, and I did not love that. And I'm like, nope, these kids, I love these kids. And we all love these kids. We've had so many great families. Like I said, we will work lengths to make this work, to give our kids. And like I said, that was kind of the unexpected turn of the business. I had told Brooke when she started, I said, you know what, if I did the commute. I commuted to Minot for 4.5 years. And I'm like, I respect that commute. And so Brooke and I had an agreement when the caseload built up down there, she could stay home. Now she has a baby. So 2 of my girls are from down there. And so they actually both have Brooke is down there 3 days a week. Kendra is down there a couple days a week. We actually just landed ourselves an office. Do you know where our office is? Okay, our office is in I learned this, the main mall in Strasbourg, right next to the school. So the kids now have been able to come over across. So it's just been wonderful to see them be able to spread down there, and even to service kids in the South Dakota, like the upper South Dakota region, you know, the Harriets, those kind of areas. So they've been able to, and a lot of those providers provide for both. I had a friend that goes, you don't open that can of worms. I'm like, too late. I just did. And it's okay. I love that we can. I love that we can do that. And if I need to hire more staff up here and have them service those areas down there, I will do so, because I feel they get underserved. Well, and a lot of them were driving either to Bismarck or Jamestown for service. And so we will do our best to get kids where they are. Unfortunately, COVID last year gave us the option of telehealth. Not that I'm happy COVID happened, but telehealth now has become part of our world. Some kids do well, like you said, some kids don't do well. Speech is great for telehealth if you can get a kid that can cooperate. Most kids do pretty well. Our kids did pretty well. It's not ideal. We'd always prefer to stay in person best we can. So. Our social workers are so good. They're so good. And in fact, just say you want it. And we, to my knowledge, have not, you know, there's new ones coming in. I know you guys cycle through social workers and caseworkers sometimes. We have not, either on the Burley or the Morton side, had an issue with getting services for kids. I met with them. Actually, that was probably one of the best meetings I ever had. They were one of my first meetings I ever had when I started the practice, was with the county. And I met with them twice. I've met with them twice now. And it has been well received both times. They love. Yes, it does. Yes, we've been well received. I've been blessed with good caseworkers and people that have been advocates for these kids. The benefit of going in home was huge for them with the amount of appointments that people have. So really, typically our social workers have been on the ball and been like, okay, I'm going to send you to OT. I'm going to send you, now they're getting used, because Erin just came on in May. Now they're getting used that now we have speech. So now we have multiples. We are looking to hire a physical therapist, but most of the time we have not been met with any resistance for service.
My favorite thing I have to tell you guys is my favorite thing is on Fridays. This is what usually happens. Ring, ring, ring. Hi, this is Peggy from Burley County Social Services. Or hi, this is Gabby from Nexus Path. You guys, they call nonstop for you guys. They care. They really do. So, I mean, as a speech therapist, I love getting those calls. They're usually on Fridays. That's just how it rolls with Burley County, Morton County, and Path. So we've had great luck with them.
We do our darndest. We do our darndest to make it work to your guys' schedule. We certainly realize the extent of the time that it takes. I mean, we've heard of people taking hour to 2 hours during the day to have to travel for therapy. We do our best to especially the older kids. We tend to preface or to save those after school times for our older kids. We typically can't do our 1, 2, 3-year-olds after school. We really try our best, but in the case that you would have a younger one that you're like, I can't leave work. What we try and work out with families is, hey, let us see them at daycare 3 weeks a month. We'll try once a month to touch base with you at home. So just because we set a place doesn't mean that place has to be set. Some of us, I am one of them. I don't know. I don't ask my staff, but I'll figure it out. Typically, I'm okay doing an early or morning if some families are like, hey, I'll do 7 or 7:30 times. Great. I'll get up at 7. I'll get up at 7:30. So some staff are willing to do that. I don't make my staff do that, but if it works for a family, we do offer that as an option too. Some kids are better in the mornings. I find a lot of the kids are better in the mornings before their day totally, we get them at 5 o'clock at night and they're like, I hate everything I look at and everybody that talks to me. So we do our best to accommodate schedules as best as we can. I'm that person too. Oh, that's a brilliant question. Where is Kendra? So Kendra is one of my Strasbourg girls as well, or Linton girls as well. I do have a couple therapists, Lindsay and Kendra both have extra training in vision. Yes, we do. The rest of us are learning. We're getting more of these, we call them cortical visual impairments, kids that are shaken baby, kids that are physically abused, kids with just general, we have a couple kids that are just, I have one whose optic nerve didn't develop appropriately, and yeah, we're stretching into that too. Because I think the last I heard was like 1 in 4 school age kids has a vision problem. It was huge. We really do try our best because we realize, and we trust me, if we ever have to say, hey, your kiddo's a little bit too young to be seen after school, it hurts us as much as it does anybody else. Like, we hate to say that, like, we'd give everybody everything if we could give them everybody. So what we do is we do the best. We staff every Monday schedules and such, and we try and make things work so we can get schedules to be the best for everybody. It's a process. Ask these two how much we schedule. And how many schedules I have sitting out on the conference table on Monday at noon. Mm-hmm. Yep, we really look at the collaboration of care. So early intervention is good, very good for, well, and I've heard things have changed as far as their referral, like as far as what they can refer for and such, due to state guidelines. And it is, the last time I had heard, and this, I haven't read into it much, but apparently what was told to me before I left Minot 4.5 years ago, or whatever it is now, was that they couldn't actually formally put in that they could refer for outpatient service. So where we were seeing a lot of referrals from early intervention up in Minot, we stopped getting them, and we couldn't figure out why. But apparently there's something in the formal paperwork that said that they couldn't. So, but we will work collaboratively with them some of them will do it in a nonchalant way. Like our school therapist can't recommend to outpatient without the school having to pay. So if you get a therapist in school saying, you know what, this kid needs outpatient services, that makes the school liable to have to pay for outpatient services because they're not. So there's a very touchy line, I think, in all avenues about referring to outpatient. Some people, if they're really good, and I had a friend who was really good, would be like, you have options. So we try and educate how we can, and another thing I'd like to throw in, because I think it's a tough line, if I can have a minute, is educational therapy versus school therapy, or outpatient therapy versus school therapy. Just because a kid qualifies for outpatient services does not mean they'll qualify for school. So we get some families who are like, okay, my kid qualified for outpatient services, he or she will qualify for school services. And that's not true. And I like to put that out there because we get a lot of families and it causes a lot of heartache. Because they're like, well, I don't understand why this person can see them, but you can't see them. They have to qualify so low in school for services to get qualified that it's painful. They have to be so delayed, you guys, it's painful. So I like to think, from the early intervention to collaborate with early intervention, to us, to the schools, to have that nice collaboration amongst all professionals to give these kids, I like to think we can help fill the gap where some of those other services can't. I like to think we can pick up kids where other services can't, just because of guidelines and rules and things like that. So I like to throw that in because I hate seeing the heartache of families when kids don't qualify for school. So.
That was awesome. Yeah, give them a hand.